Welcome to Ethos Effect.
Welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast.
Podcast.
After building and learning from failures,
We discovered our ethos and leveraged it
to scale, sell, and build again our seven-figure businesses.
whether you're starting out or leveling up.
This podcast is your source for innovation and lasting impact.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast. This is Donovan Reikus, joined with my wife.
Chelsea Reikus.
Today we have on Jesse Stakes. Interesting personality, especially for an industry that you wouldn't really expect it, right? Banking.
Yes.
He does a lot to build his personal brand. He has a podcast of his own, Making Sense of It All, where he brings on other business owners, entrepreneurs, talks about the things they're passionate about, they're growing. Also was a TV host, which not really what, I had in mind when I thought banker, right?
100%. He also, one of his main values, and I think it's going to be very valuable for you guys, is giving first before taking in building relationships.
Yes.
Thought that was really cool.
Totally. Without further ado, let's jump into the conversation with Jesse Stakes.
Welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Reikus, here with my husband, Donovan Reikus, my co-host, and today we have Jesse Stakes. He is a TV show host, a podcast host, and a business advisor. I am prepared for a pretty interesting conversation with Jesse Stakes, so thank you for being with us here on the Ethos Effect.
I appreciate you having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here. Glad we could have this conversation. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm excited that you are such a pro at podcasts. It makes all of this a lot easier, when you have somebody.
I know, I'm a little uncomfortable. The shoe's on the other foot here.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not used to being interviewed. Well, we'll be nice, I promise. Awesome. So why don't you...
I can take it.
Can you? Well, we'll see. Why don't you start us off by giving our listeners a background on who Jesse Stakes is?
So, as you said, I'm a business advisor. Primarily where I focus on helping businesses in today's world is in lending. I help small to medium-sized businesses, sometimes large businesses, find capital that they need. Whether it's short-term needs like a line of credit, where they're just looking to bridge the gap as far as making payroll and their day-to-day revenue, and they're just waiting on payments to come in, or if it's to buy a piece of real estate. If somebody's looking for a piece of investment real estate, there's all kinds of things that I do, but primarily I'm making sure that people have the capital that they need in order to succeed financially.
Awesome. And what triggered your start into this industry?
It's kind of an interesting story, and I hope you have a few minutes.
We're here for it.
Originally in my career, I was in payroll sales, and I had gone into payroll sales after owning my own small business, and I made a tax error on my own. And so when I did, it cost me about $2,000, and it also made me realize, hey, you don't want to be a jack of all trades. You want to be a master of one. And so I hired actually Paychex to do my payroll at the time. When I hired Paychex, the industry that I was in was very commoditized. I was doing a lot of tchotchkes and a lot of logoed wearables into college bookstores, into businesses. And it was at the time, and this was, it was 2007, 2008, the Sunshine Act had just gone into effect in the pharmaceutical world. And when they did, they started to have to 1099 doctors for any gifts they gave them. That being said, pharmaceutical reps used to give a lot of wearables, a lot of tchotchkes, a lot of bags, a lot of logoed merchandise to their doctors, and they didn't have to 1099 them for it. So when they started to, some of their suppliers, when they started losing some of that volume, they started coming into some of the markets that I was in for more volume. That being said, I was in my mid-20s, I guess, at the time. It wasn't a market that I wanted to stay in, and Paychex was hiring for a sales rep at the time. So I ended up going into the payroll business. Loved it. It was absolutely a lot of fun. I got to touch on a lot of things as far as when you talk about, we always used to call it the wheel of service, but when you talk about payroll services, you have to talk about taxes, you have to talk about benefits, 401k, all of the things that touch an employee from an employer perspective. And it really excited me. I loved doing what I did, but I also had aspirations to grow my career. So fast forward, I believe it was 2008, 2009, probably 2009, Wachovia had ran into a lot of trouble, and they needed to be bought by another bank. And the federal government at first said that Citibank was going to buy them. Well, we were very happy when that happened because Paychex had a contract to sell payroll to all of Citibank's clients in the Northeast. So we assumed that would translate to down in Florida. A day later, federal government comes out and says, no, hold on a second. Citi has their own issues. It's going to be Wells Fargo that buys them. Well, Wells Fargo had a payroll service that they owned and operated on the West Coast, and I knew about it. So I asked several friends of mine that worked at Wachovia at the time, the first person that, or whenever that came out as a job, I'd love to know because I would like to apply for it. And I ended up being one of the first people that they hired on the East Coast. So that got me into banking, per se. I was still doing payroll services, but I was in the banking world. I did very well with Wells Fargo. We grew a huge client base. I ended up managing a team throughout Florida, basically from Jacksonville over to the Panhandle and then down into Naples. We grew the business. It was a very successful business. They ended up selling it to ADP actually for a little over $250 million. And don't quote me on that. Somebody might correct me there. But long story short, they made quite a bit of money on selling the product. But it left a lot of us that were payroll professionals working inside of a bank kind of wondering what we were going to do next. One of the leaders at the bank, a gentleman named Scott Coble, had asked me if I'd considered staying in banking. At the time, I hadn't, but I started to consider it. I did dabble a little bit in merchant services within Wells Fargo, but then I ultimately decided to go into lending because I felt like it was a little more honest, a little bit more upright of a profession, and I felt like it was something that I'd like to learn. So that's really what got me into banking. Long story, but it was an interesting journey, and I feel like it bears telling the story.
A lot of relevance there.
So you have the banking history. How does the podcast and the TV show, how does that come in line with your profession? Is that more hobby, passion? Do they come together?
Comes together. It absolutely comes together, and it actually, how it started when I started being a television host was, we were making cold calls, actually setting appointments for people that were interested in looking at other banks, and a gentleman named Mike White, he owns Buzz Media in Jacksonville, Florida. Client Focus Media is the actual parent company. Mike tells me, okay, fine, I'll meet with you. Be at my office at 6 a.m. next Wednesday or whatever the day was. And I think he thought I was going to try to push for a different time, but I said, absolutely, I'll see you at 6 o'clock. So the next week comes, I have no voice, and I'm not going to belabor your audience by trying to, mock what my voice sounded like. But I basically told him, I said, hey, we can meet another day. I don't want to get you in your office sick. And he's like, nope, see you at 6 o'clock. And really, it was kind of I think it was a little bit of a blow off, or a little bit of kind of just seeing if I'd show up or not. Well, I showed up, and we ended up having a pretty interesting conversation. He ended up actually becoming a client of mine. I actually ended up doing a line of credit for him and his business. They had a software company that they were trying to launch at the time, and we ended up doing a small line of credit just to help them get off the ground. Once I had a voice and we could actually speak, he had some interest in bringing me in as a host. And he said, do you ever thought about being a TV host? I said, absolutely not. It was outside of my box. It wasn't something that I had ever considered at the time. And he asked me several times over the next 2 or 3 months. And I finally was like, you know what are you doing in life? If you're not getting outside of your comfort zone, if you're not trying to grow, then what are you doing? So I finally said yes to him. And we started the show Buzzworthy Business over at Buzz TV. I did it for 3 years. I enjoyed it. And really what it is, this is what podcasting, or this is what television hosting is for me. It allows me to give either my clients or prospects a platform, and it allows them to talk about their business and share what they do with the audience. It doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial, but it makes them real. It makes them human. It makes them people to my audience. The other thing is it's a give. Like, I always believe that when you're trying to earn somebody's business, you have to be willing to give them something first. Because if I'm just constantly asking people from things, then I'm a very selfish person at that point. So my goal with this has always been, I want to be able to give somebody something, give them a reason why they should or want to do business with Jesse Steaks.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the podcast, that is making sense
of it all.
Making sense of it all.
Making sense of it all. Tell us about that.
So The show at Buzz, the interviews are pretty quick. They were like 6 to 8 minutes, kind of a, hi, who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? And then it was and then on to the next. I felt like there was an opportunity to dive in deeper. It's very similar to what you guys talk about with the ethos effect. The biggest thing, the most important thing to me when you talk to somebody about what they're doing is, why do you do it? What inspired you to do what you're doing? And so that's really, that was a huge part of what germinated me deciding to change the television show into a podcast and go a little bit longer, going about 25, 30 minutes with the conversations. The other part of that with all of this was the fact that these people are experts in their field that I'm bringing on. Whether they own their own business or they're a service professional, they have a lot to offer the audience. And you really couldn't get to that in 6 to 8 minutes. You needed to go a little long form. You needed to give them an opportunity to display what they know, display why somebody who's listening to it would want to do business with these folks. So that was kind of what inspired it. There's another part to it as well. When I was growing up, both of my parents were very blue collar, and they both said, go get a college degree, do something that's easier than what we did to make a living. I went and got a college degree, but now what do you do with it? It's like, okay, I got this piece of paper, and it's, I had a baseball scholarship that kind of put me through a lot of that schooling, but it's like, okay, what do you do with it now? It's like, I got this, it's a business degree. Other than interview for a job, what does it do for you? And I think that there's a lot of people out there in that boat where they have the aptitude, they have the ability, they just don't know where to focus their attention, or what's out there, what options are there for them. And so that was another piece of starting this podcast. Was I wanted to put together a collection of different professions, different way that people make money, so that people could have something to go to and say, okay, what's it like to sell health and benefits to somebody? What's it like to be a banker? What's it like to sell payroll services? What's it like to own your own plumbing business? What's it like to be an artist? Anything, everything, but just give somebody just a little sneak peek into what people do as a profession. And maybe it's something that catches your interest. Maybe it inspires a college kid to actually know where they want to take their life.
I love that. I had no idea on the latter half. Like, obviously, I figured the podcast had to do with prospecting and, giving your clients or your prospects a platform to that giving piece that you talked about. But I had no idea that there is an ulterior motive of like helping young people find a pathway, right? Like, that is so inspirational. I also completely agree with you on, questioning the validity of a college degree and how that actually translates into making money, right? Like, and as a fellow college athlete, curious, where did you play ball at?
A couple of places, University of North Florida here in Jacksonville, and then also over at Tallahassee Community College.
No way. So North Florida was in the Atlantic Sun Conference when the Atlantic Sun Conference was a conference, because I played at Stetson. So I had been up to UNF a few times. But how do you feel like, if at all, your experience in collegiate athletics, paved a pathway for you? Has it been beneficial in any way?
I think from a competitive standpoint, I think that it teaches you how to compete. As and I would say, and I know you played softball, but baseball or softball in particular, you learn how to play as a team, but you also learn that individual contribution is incredibly important, and that it matters, and that it is part of being a team, is contributing as an individual. I think baseball, more than anything else, does that, just because you're standing there all by yourself at the plate. Or if you're a pitcher, you're standing there on the mound all by yourself. And yes, you have a team of 9 individuals out there, or 8 other individuals that are helping you, or that are all fighting for the same goal, but you got to do your part. And if you're not doing your part, then, you're not, it's that whole thing about the weakest link in the chain. If the weakest link in the chain breaks, the whole thing breaks.
Were you a pitcher?
So, I was a very poor pitcher whenever they had to hand me the ball. I threw the ball about 82 miles an hour.
The bullpen's empty. We need you, Jesse.
But you got it. I could throw some strikes if they needed an arm midweek. But no, I was a first baseman. I couldn't run a lick, but I had a pretty good stick on me. So,
are you a lefty?
So they had to find me a place. Yes, I am.
Nice. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit. So you talked about your passion to inspire young people and kind of help them have some options in finding careers via your podcast. You talked about bringing value to your prospects and your clients and giving before taking. if you had to summarize your ethos, your why, what drives you? I know you're asking people this all day long on your podcast, but share with us what that ethos is for you.
For me, it's helping people, number one. And then it's also putting my family in a better position. Like, the reason why I get up and go to work in the first place is that so that my family can succeed financially, and so that I put my family in a better spot than I was. I always believe, and this is, right or wrong, I know that everything isn't linear in life, but I've always believed that we have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us. And so my parents gave me that opportunity to go out and earn a college degree or get a college degree and do something that they didn't do. Well, then what am I doing for my kids? What am I doing for the next generation? And that, to me, that's a huge answer to what my ethos is that. I get a lot of internal feeling of satisfaction from truly helping people with what I do. I think that, whether you any type of sales job that you're in, people always look and think, okay, you're selling so you can make money. And that is true. Like I said, that is a very important thing to me, and there is a reason why. But the other part of that that's so important is that typically you're putting a solution in front of somebody that's improving upon what they had before. So you're actually making their business either more efficient, or you're saving them cost. You're helping them provide their employees with something more than what they had before. Something you're doing is adding to the value of their business. And so that's another one for me. That's very, very important.
Is it just me? I mean, when I think of a banker or a loan officer, like, they seem like pretty rigid positions, and I feel like the way you approach it, I mean, I would never guess that like a loan officer or anybody working at a bank would be, hosting podcasts as TV shows, like kind of being out there. Is that unusual nowadays, or have things kind of changed a little bit?
I would say it's unusual. I mean, I think that typically when you see a loan officer or you see somebody who's doing commercial lending at a bank, a lot of the times, if you look at their career path, those people, they went through a credit training, or they went through some sort of for a lack of a better way of saying it, some sort of an internship through banking. And I came in through the side door to like, as far as like, just to use an analogy, like I was in sales. I got into banking through payroll service sales, which is a very blue collar, white collar sale.
Yeah.
There's no contracts. You have to put your best foot forward. You have to make sure that you're taking care of your customer every single time they run payroll, or they can fire you. And so I've always, like, my career, and also the way, I grew up around vinyl siding and roofing and, window installation. And it's just, you take care of your people. You make sure that you do right by somebody. And like, to me, those are the things that I do believe make me different. But I just came to banking in a different way. I used to joke around and say I would never want to be a banker, but it wasn't because of what, like, the kind of work that I do now. It was because I didn't see myself going through that process that they did. As far as, I didn't see myself, analyzing tax returns and being essentially an underwriter before I actually went out and was amongst business owners, and actually helping them succeed financially. I felt like I guess that's the thing, is that I just came into it in a very different way. Not that I'm not trained as far as to actually underwrite somebody's business, but I was trained in that secondary. I was trained as a salesperson and as somebody to go out there and help somebody find a solution to their problem first.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So earlier you were talking about managing people, and I know when I did my research on you, you've managed large teams. Let's talk about the people side of a business, right? I know we've talked about sales and solutions and all of that. Most business owners, most people in management positions such as yourself, understand that it's people first, right? So tell us some, if you have stories or advice that you would share when it comes to managing large teams of people.
God, to me, like, I've always been around sales. So
right.
So to me, I think one of the number one, before you ever manage a person, it's all about selecting the people that are going to be on your team. And it's about understanding. I think you have to understand, before you ever interview a person, before you ever look at a resume, what are you looking for? Like, what is that, perfect individual? And not saying that everyone's going to be perfect, but, in a perfect world, what is that individual that I'm looking for? And then I think that you can start to refine that as far as what is that interview process going to look like. One of my favorite questions that I would always ask somebody when I was interviewing them is, number one, similar to this, what's important to you? Why do you do what you do? And then the other question that I always ask them is, are you running, and you have to ask this in a roundabout way, but I try to figure out, are they running from something or are they running towards something? Are they excited about what they're about to do? Are they passionate about it, or could they be passionate about it? Are they looking to learn? Or is it just a job? Is it just something that, I need a job, I need a paycheck, and you guys had an open slot, so I'm interviewing? Or I don't want to do what I'm doing now, so I'm running away from that and going towards what you're offering. So that, to me, that was like the absolute most important thing, to make sure that you had a solid team and that the culture, that you could actually build a culture. You have to have the right people, because you can tell people, here's what I want my culture to be, or here's what I want, here's what I want to instill. But if you don't have the right mix of people, it doesn't matter what you want, because you're gonna get what you asked for, or you're gonna get what you hired. So I think that's one of the most important things. Kind of, but along, kind of to answer your actual question that you said, for me, I think, making sure that people had a kind of understood, okay, here's what the goal is, like getting buy-in, making sure that team buys into whatever that goal is, or whatever that, what you're trying to achieve, just making sure that everybody's on the same page, and actually everyone understands what that goal is. Because I can't tell you how many people that I've known that have been in roles where they don't know what their goals are. They don't know what their purpose is, and they're kind of floating. They know that they're not bad people. They could probably be great at what they do. They're lacking that direction, or they're lacking the leadership that, somebody owed them, I think, if they were going to hire them.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, or did I miss the mark there?
Honestly, that answered it perfectly, because really what I wanted to talk about was values-based hiring, values-based leadership, and you answered it before I could even get there, so that's amazing. We definitely, with our business, Ethos Benefits, we've invested a lot in understanding hiring and retention over the last 3 years. And it was actually my personal priority from a leadership standpoint, and truly developing that culture, right? Like, there's one thing, like you said, to talk about the culture that you want at a company. It's a whole other thing to execute on it and make it a real living, breathing thing in your business, right?
No doubt.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And, this is a good thing for aspiring entrepreneurs to hear, people in management positions, anybody listening to the podcast. If you have a culture problem, or if you're looking to make, if you are looking at your people and you think that there's a problem, the truth is the problem is you. It's always going to come back to leadership, and it's always going to come back to who did you hire and why did you hire them? So having that core set of values and hiring according to that core set of values, which those two questions you asked are perfect reflections of what are these people's values. Because once they get into the role, shit gets hard, right? Like, no matter what job you're in, owner, management, any position, it's going to get hard. So you have to have that value that you're coming back to. So yeah, I'm happy that you said that. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what's next for you in your life, in your career, what's going, what big, hairy, audacious goals do you have when you continue thinking about providing for your family?
So, okay, two things. Number one, I started this podcast last year. Like, as far as making sense of it all, was, again, it kind of came from my experience in the studio and feeling like I could do something better. So my whole goal with doing it for the first year was to kind of prove to myself, okay, let's get 50 interviews out there. Let's learn how to produce an interview, because I've done a lot of my production myself, and I did it on purpose because I wanted to learn it. I wanted it to be something I wanted to, learn the skill and own it. And so I felt like the first year was a success. And I felt like I met a lot of great people, including the two of you. And I think that it was, it's something that it was very well received. And so this year, my goal with the podcast is to really kind of shave off the rough edges, kind of answer my own question that I ask other people. It's like, okay, why does this exist? There's like I said, there's several reasons that I know of, but it's like, okay, now what can I do to make it better, to make it, again, give the people that are choosing to be on my show, give them a brighter light that shines on their business, get more people to see it, like as far as, create, as far as like SEO and all of the things that are important that I really don't, I'll say it, they're not my area of expertise. It's like, okay, time to either learn these things or outsource them, one or the other, because that's what's going to help the people that are my guests and the people that are going to join my show, or the people that are going to actually benefit as far as buying products of the people that are on the show or things that I sell. That's how they're going to see it, is to actually, widen the audience. So that's a big goal of mine. The other goal is, being that I've always worked for a bank, there is a huge area of opportunity because there's a lot of folks that banks won't finance. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily qualify, but they are entrepreneurs. They are people who have tremendous ideas. They know they're going to be successful, but they're either too early in their business's life cycle, or they've had hiccups along the way. They've had something that makes them unattractive to a bank, because a bank at first is a risk mitigation organization. They are going to protect their own balance sheet before they give capital to somebody else. They're not a venture capitalist, and they're not somebody who's, the risk is very low as far as what they're willing to take. That being said, one of the goals that I've had this year is to make sure that I can help service the needs, or I have people that are connected to me that can service the needs of anybody who has come to me with an ask for capital. So that's something that I'm solving as we speak, but just making sure that I never want to say no to somebody, even if the answer that I have for them is not necessarily attractive. Even if it's something that they would like it to look prettier, they'd like the number to look lower as far as an interest rate, whatever that is, I still would like to be able to offer them something and not say no. I'll let them tell me no.
Well, and that's interesting because you and I have talked in the past about the power of yes, right? And there's a book on it and all of that. So why don't you close out our show today with just how that's changed your life, and maybe for our aspiring managers and entrepreneurs listening, how just being open-minded can transform your life.
Yeah, I think that everything that I've ever had happen to me from a positive perspective has been because I've been willing to try, or willing, open to saying yes, and then figure out how to do it after I've said yes. But it's one of those things to where I think that the more experiences that you have in life, the more you open yourself to opportunity, the more good things come your way. So and I've told you that before, the answer is yes. And so, I'm going to tell you yes, and then I'll figure out how to do it if I don't know how to do it.
Sounds like someone else I know. That's literally how our insurance agency started. So that was Donovan cool. All the way.
Agreed. So Jesse, what's the best way for people to kind of stay in touch with you? Maybe keep up with your podcast. I imagine your podcast is everywhere podcasts are hosted. Making sense of it all. So CENTS, right?
MakingSenseOfItAll.net. They can find all the episodes of the podcast there. They can utilize, if they use Apple Podcasts, if they use Spotify, whatever podcast platform they use, they can access it through MakingSenseOfItAll.net. If you want to learn more about myself, or you want to get in contact with me, you can just go to jessestakes.com. JESSESTAKES.com.
See, again, I would have never thought a banker could have their own personal website. Like, you're just blowing my mind with what I thought the role entailed. Like,
your personal branding's on point.
I may ask for forgiveness and not permission, but don't tell.
That's kind of why I was saying that, because I had a securities license, and like the hoops to do anything is just, you can't get any work done,
It's different when you're licensed. Yeah. When you're a licensed investment professional, or when you have, a Series 7 or a 66 or anything like that, you definitely have more hoops that you have to jump through. I am not a licensed banker. I am not a wealth professional. So I do have a little bit more freedom there.
That's good.
Well, I'm glad, because it's definitely been impactful to the community, absolutely myself included. So thank you, Jesse, for being with us, and we'll hopefully have you on again one day soon.